what are the real roles and responsibilities of a UX UI designer or a product designer?
Once you've created the design with all your logic, all your thinking, अब आपको stakeholders को उस पे align करना है और उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा time जाता है.
Finding out that there's a huge difference between the real expectation and the job description.
When I have had to write job descriptions, I've probably just written 5 to 10 pointers. This is what I need, and this is what you will do.
What is the difference between what is asked for and what is written in the job description?
You want to join this company because of these reasons. And these reasons are created when you research about that company.
How this new generation, which is aspiring designers or people who are thinking that design could be one of the fields to grow.
You start solving problems. Problem solving is the key to design. I would define it as problem solving systematically. Now, what is the difference then between a UX designer and a product designer? Because these are also two separate terms. And that's where the product designer term is, I think, the most relevant in today's market. And that's also an expectation from a designer that now you're not just thinking about the research part, not just the design part, but also the business or the product part of it.
Of the industry where you are going to design is far more important than the design knowledge or the design education that you've gone through.
UI is part of UX, and the UX school then becomes a part of product design with the product ownership angle to it. Execution will always keep getting faster and faster.
Hello everyone, welcome to Unmapped Journeys, where we go deeper into each and every profession of our guest and understand what it really takes to be a professional in that domain. What are the real challenges? What are the real struggles which usually nobody talks about? So today I have with me Ujjwal Kumar, who heads design at Spinny, one of the most popular brands around used car selling. Well, Ujjwal, let's start with where are you coming from? So if I give you a gist about what Ujjwal has been doing, he has been a TEDx speaker 4 times, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. And he has been playing a lot of instruments. Tabla you started with.
Yeah, tabla, drums, and then ghatam.
Wonderful. And I have recently came across one of your handpan YouTube videos as well.
Yeah.
That was mesmerizing. So you must have experienced a lot of ups and downs in starting of a career and then finalizing UX, UI and whatnot.
Sure.
So let me start with a question. Was it the first day where you just woke up and you decided, okay, I want to get into design, or was it something that you planned or you wanted to get into?
Okay. So thank you for having me here firstly. Thank you for the invitation. I'll want to answer this as honestly as possible. So I think where design came for me was my fascination about computers and not having access to a computer at an early age. So I remember I would go to my neighbor's house. This is back in Bihar, in Patna, and in a very remote place in Patna as well. And I used to go to my neighbor's house, sneak into their computer room. They had a computer. They were richer than us. So they had a computer back then. I'm talking about the year 99 or 2000. So way back. And there I would use animation on PowerPoint just to move things from left to right. And just to get fascinated by the fact that I can do this on a computer and see it happening live in front of me. So that's, I think, where my inclination, or at least my initiation to design started. And back in 2003-04 was the time when I started experimenting with Photoshop. And that was also due to my school giving me that kind of exposure. We, at least the first 1 year in 6th standard, the first 6 months at least, we spent time learning Photoshop, and I would do all kinds of crazy things on Photoshop. I would take a group picture of a trip that we had gone into in school. I would take one guy's face, and I would put it on all the girls in the picture. So all 6 of them would look like twins, identical twins. So and I would be like, I would be so fascinated by it. I would show it around, and I would be like, this is how cool I am. So for me, those were some of the bits where design started coming into my life. And as you mentioned, music was a major part of my journey so far. So music was always there, but design was happening in the background, at least till a certain age. All right. So I never really thought about making design my career. That was not my first career choice. But it was the time around my second year in college is when I realized that there is actually a possibility of making a career in design. And for me at that time, graphic design was the only kind of discipline in design that I knew or understood. So that's where I started. For a lot of UX designers today, and especially from my generation who are coming, they are probably coming from a graphic design background as well. So I started there, and then I got the opportunity to work for, some international companies and agencies. I think in my second year of college, there was one project that I did for a UK-based football stadium. I was responsible for their website design. So for somebody who's barely 19 years old, who gets to design a major website for a football stadium for a football club which is based out of UK, that was a lot of exposure. I charged very less money for it because I did not understand the industry that well. But yeah, that was my first project, and from there on, I just kind of started. And by the end of my college, I had kind of inclined towards making design as a career, and music kind of subdued, apart from in all other things. So I think, as an introduction, I think that's what I will tell you. That's where design started for me.
Okay, let me take you back to your educational era. While I was researching about you, I figured out that you was doing something into history honors, and simultaneously, or after that, you went to NIFT,
Yeah,
and then you went to IIM.
yeah.
So tell me the story behind all this and how these education institutions actually shaped your overall journey and then design.
Got it. So I think I took up history honors considering that I want to be a full-time musician, and I'm just taking a course for a tag of bachelor's degree. And while I was in that course, I realized that I don't want to pursue music as a career because it is very futile. There is no definition of what kind of money I would end up making, and especially being a instrumentalist, there was, at least at that time, there was not a lot of scope. So that was my motivation to switch to design, because that was the second skill that I had. But that was back then. And when I realized that I want to make a career in design, and I mentioned I got to work on some of the projects that I just mentioned, that's when I explored that, okay, alongside my bachelor's degree, I can also pursue a 1 year program from NIFT Delhi. So I did that. And that course was Design Process Thinking, the name of that course that time. And that course helped me understand uh, the nomenclature that you use in design. Now, that is very, very important. And that also helped me understand how do you communicate design? How do you talk about design? So that course was not specific to UX. That course was nothing related to product design or UX design. That course was just design thinking. How do you think as a designer? So we did a lot of mood boarding exercises. And back then I was doing mood boarding. I was learning how to do mood boards. And even till now, that is something that I apply in my everyday design process. And of course, if any designers are watching this, they also understand how mood boarding is very, very important for them. So yeah, those things is where that helped me. And it, of course, when you go to a premier institute like an AFT, it helps you land your first job as well. So that's where that helped me. The other part, where I did my management program from IIM, that was fairly recent. So that I wanted to just do as an upskilling, thing that I wanted to do alongside work. And I think, again, it was a very good refresher course, just to understand what is happening currently in the market. And that course, at least, what it helped me gain, from a knowledge point of view, was I got to learn a lot of new design thinking techniques, which were not probably present at the time when I was doing that course from NIFT. So these two courses, again, they just added to things that I was already doing, and it just gave me more advantage in the industry. That's where I think it helps me.
A follow-up question on understanding the very basics, because a lot of my audience are those who are thinking of getting into design, if at all design is a career. So for that, I want to understand what exactly, in the most lamest simple language, mood boarding. So as a follow-up question, I have a very basic, it may sound very cliche, it may sound very basic, lame, but here it is. Because a lot of my audience would be those who are thinking of design as a career, should they even take it or not. What, according to you, in the most simplest language, is mood boarding?
So mood boarding is essentially collecting a set of visual information, or it could be even words. But for this context, for design context, let's say it's collection of a lot of visual information into one large piece of whiteboard, but in the digital space, that's an infinity board. And basically that gives you the inspiration to create that one single design that you want to create. So and I would take an analogy, from my musician part as well. Whenever I've had to compose music, right, I would stop listening to one single artist, and at least that artist that sounds a lot like my own, music, because I don't want to sound like that one person. I want my sound to be a mix of everything that I listen to me around myself. So, for example, I was working on an album back in 2011, and during the album creation, I started listening to a lot of Indian classical music, which was completely different from the kind of music that I was creating, and that helped me kind of bring some new fresh element to it. So again, coming back to mood boards, when I'm creating a mood board, I'm basically collecting every little piece of color or a basic style of font or even a button style that I can use from one element or one kind of visual screen to my actual design. So it could be collection of 100 different screens. I keep collecting, I keep copy pasting. The tools that I use, I'll talk about that as well. Pinterest is very, very powerful, and I think a lot of people use it for a lot of different purposes. In fact, when I did my wedding shopping, I created a board on Pinterest. So mood boarding is essentially that. You collect a lot of visual information, and it kind of helps you create and define your style.
So, would you agree that people? I'm just taking this example from a very personal one. When you're making your own house or decorating or doing the interiors of your own house, you collect a lot of
Yeah,
information,
yeah,
which
absolutely.
again, visual references that maybe this piece will look like that, maybe that corner will look like that, and then you collect it all together, and then you talk to your uh, contractors, your interior designers, that okay, this is something that I want to have a look as. So do you want to say that before that look actually gets finalized, you get a lot of references?
Absolutely.
Great. So when you just mentioned that the recent course that you did with IIM, which was part of your upskilling journey, what is your take on upskilling and why is it even necessary?
Sure. So I think during the initial part of your journey in your career, upskilling is very linear. So you're just learning hard skill. So that could be learning the tool, learning the craft, or learning how to do research. So these are very essential early on in your career. When you're doing something mid-career, then you need to see the incremental value of it. So for me, I think upskilling, uh, when you're doing it initially, of course it's dependent upon the kind of college you choose, the kind of courses you take. So that decision is still a larger decision based on your aptitude as well. But when you're doing that in between your career, it's very strategic on what value is it actually bringing to you. So for me, at least for the course that I chose, I think one was of course the value proposition of IIM itself, and the other part was I needed to get myself updated with new design thinking techniques. So I knew what I wanted from that course. I saw a lot of people after the course struggling for placement. So they were not very strategic with choosing that course. So that probably was not the course for them. So you need to be very, very careful, especially mid-career, if you want to. And I was doing a part-time course, right? If you're actually thinking about taking a career break and taking a course, you need to also understand, will that add a value? And I'm saying this because a lot of people come to me asking, should I take masters or not? So there, that question becomes even more important. Do you want 2 years of experience, or do you want 2 years of a course? That course has to be that good that it gives you 2 years of work experience value worth, right? So I think that's how I would talk about upskilling.
Okay, so this brings me to the most important part of the podcast, which is what is the difference between UX and UI design? And does it even fall in the category of actually being different?
Sure. So I think the term UI UX designer has been around for a while, and I think the relevance of the term itself has died down at least today. So how I look at it is today the most common term that you'll find in the market is a product designer. So there's actually been a transition from UI UX designer to UX designer to product designer. So I'll talk about all these transitions and why these terms existed in the first place. So back in 2015, 2014, when I was also in the initial part of my career, UI UX designer was the most common term. And there the expectation from the company that I used to work with was purely UI work. There was not a lot of UX importance given at that time in the Indian ecosystem, right? Then when I moved on to more roles, more senior roles, then the term UX designer started getting popular. So the term UX, user experience design, is the entire segment of your design process, which includes UI, which includes research, which includes wireframing, which includes information architecture. So that entire process is your UX process. Now, what is the difference then between a UX designer and a product designer? Because these are also two separate terms. Now, these can be used interchangeably, but from my understanding and how I have had these definitions in my head is product designer is one level up from a UX designer. As a UX designer, you're only responsible for the user experience of the product. But as a product designer, you start taking a bit of product ownership as well. So what do I mean by designer taking product ownership? Like traditionally, and have had opportunities where I've had to work that way, where a designer is tasked with a given task. This is the thing that you have to do, and you start working on it. Now, from a product designer perspective, you also want to understand the impact of your work. What is it exactly doing when it's released? And how is it changing the metrics? How is it benefiting the company? So you start taking those product ownerships as well as a designer. And that's where the product designer term is, I think, the most relevant in today's market. And that's also an expectation from a designer that now you're not just thinking about the research part, not just the design part, but also the business or the product part of it. So that makes it more full stack and more comprehensive.
So, if I understand correctly, and please correct me if I'm going in the wrong direction, is UX and UI has been used as an interchangeable term, and product design is more of a business layer added to it. Do I understand that correctly?
Sure. Uh, I'll define it even better. So UI design is part of UX design. User research is also part of UX design. So these are small segments. And of course, we had the term UI UX design for a while, but UI is part of UX, and the UX pool then becomes a part of product design with the product ownership angle to it. I wouldn't still call it business angle, the product ownership angle to it. That's why the term product designer started coming up in the first place.
Can you describe in the most crudest way what are the real roles and responsibilities of a UX UI designer or a product designer? Actually में ये लोग करते क्या हैं?
So I think actually we spend a lot of time doing design and convincing stakeholders for that design. This is in the crudest form possible. Design is basically the hard skill that we put into designing something, and that design process can have multiple layers to it. कि अगर आप कोई design बना रहे हो, then you're coming from some research, you're coming from some understanding, you're coming from all that knowledge which you've then put into actually designing the product. So if I have to look at it, actual design करने में आपका 20% time जाता है, 20% of your time goes into actual designing the UI screen, and 80% goes into understanding what needs to be done, creating multiple iterations, understanding user pain points, understanding business pain points, and 20% of times you're actually designing the screen. So that's part one. The other part is once you've created the design with all your logic, all your thinking, अब आपको stakeholders को उस पर align करना है और उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा time जाता है. I have had people in my team who are great designers, very good, but what happens to their design at the end? Stakeholders से influence होते हैं, एक नॉन डिज़ाइनर के फीडबैक से अपना डिज़ाइन चेंज करते हैं और एक सब स्टैंडर्ड डिज़ाइन आगे जाने वाला हो जाता है व्हेन आई कम एंड इंटरवीन कि भाई लेट्स चेंज दिस. सो स्टेक होल्डर मैनेजमेंट इज समथिंग दैट is not talked about so much in job descriptions, but that is one of the hard and one of the core skills that you need to have. You need to know how to talk to people. You need to know how to convince non-designers for good designs and why it is a good design.
Lovely. So help me understand a little more deeper. Job description. So in my journey as a career specialist, I have seen several job descriptions coming my way.
Yeah.
And finding out that there's a huge difference between the real expectation and the job description.
Got it.
What is according to you is the real difference? आपने भी job descriptions बहुत बनाए होंगे, सेल करे होंगे, देखे होंगे, evaluate करे होंगे students उनके ऊपर, या colleges से जो students आते हैं, या अगर आप किसी experienced student को भी लेते हैं. What is your view of weighing what was asked for and what is asked for?
Got it. So I think one of the things I would say is that the JD, some of the job description that I've read over the time are very wordy. They're very long documents. And I've had the opportunity to do a lot of sourcing for my team as well. Like usually that's the HR part, but I've hired a lot of designers and I've hired them like collecting resumes to actually getting an interview and actually just closing the positions. So when I have had to write job descriptions, I've probably just written 5 to 10 pointers. This is what I need. and this is what you will do. So this ask or this kind of categorization, that what do I need to have and what will I end up doing when I join that company, if this clarity is mentioned in the JD. And why I write it myself, because I don't want to follow a template. I want to be very, very clear that this is what is expected. I need a good portfolio. I need an understanding of the tool. I need good and sometimes even great communication for senior roles. I need for you to understand how you are. I need to understand how you understand business. And if you're able to do all of that, then this is what you'll end up doing. You'll work in this part of the product. This is how you'll be contributing to the team. And this is what you'll learn when you join the company. So if you're looking at a job description, identify these things. This is all what you need to know. That what do I need to be to apply for that position? How am I qualified? Do I qualify or not? And what will I get once I join? And of course, if you're early in your career, always aim for companies who have this very, very well written, very categorically mention what you'll be end up doing, and then you question it during interview as well. That is this exactly what I'm going to do or not? Because a lot of time there is a parity there as well.
That brings me to the next question. In fact, let me put you at a spot. Whenever I have come across these interviews, what happens is and this is primarily for the audience who doesn't know what is UX UI design, has just entered into it, did a course or maybe did a degree course out of it, and now they're wondering what to do. From that perspective, they enter the room, the interview room, and they're trying to understand what am I even supposed to talk about. From that perspective, what is the difference between what is asked for and what is written in a job description?
So, job description is one part. Preparing for an interview and giving an interview is one part. So I think the first decision you kind of make is, do I want to apply for this job or not? And of course, at a time that we are in right now, we apply for multiple jobs. So of course, we can't keep a track of every job that we have applied for and can't even remember so many job applications, right? But once you're shortlisted, then you go and assess those requirements again. You learn about the company, you learn about the design team, and you do all of that before the interview, so that when you're entering a room in an interview with any person, even if it's the HR, not even the design person in that company, you are coming and saying that I am very intentional about this role. It should never come across as, you applied for it just because there was a job opening. It should be that you want to join this company because of these reasons. And these reasons are created when you research about that company. A lot of good intentions that I've seen while hiring is that your design team is, in a certain way. I'm looking for mentorship from senior designers, or your overall company's theme, the design theme of the company or the product is very cool and something that I relate to. So these are very intentional answers, right? And that's what I expect. I want that person to at least be excited about the role. If that excitement is missing, then probably there is at least some thought in my head that I have to test him really, really hard, because at least one part is not clear. I'll give you another example, one example here. A lot of times in an interview, I hear people saying, I don't know so much about cars. I'm not so excited about cars. Now, if you're going to say that in an interview where the company is doing just that, that's not a good impression. Even if you don't, so first of all, make that decision. If you want to join a company who does use cars, don't say it out loud that you're not interested in that industry. So those are some things that we should definitely not be doing in an interview scenario. Show your excitement and be prepared for that first round.
Lovely. That actually puts me to one of the interesting questions that I've been going through for a very long time. Over the last decade, I've been observing that people get into design and they're like, I can design everything and anything. And the moment I say, okay, let's say you are getting into fintech, how deeply you know the fintech companies or the fintech domain altogether? And they're like, that is not required, or I'll learn on the job. Do you agree that the industry knowledge of the industry where you are going to design is far more important than the design knowledge or the design education that you have come through?
Sure. So I think whoever you're referring to sort of answered it correctly. But if I had to frame the same answer, I would say that as a designer, you cannot control that you'll be working in the same industry for several years.
My question is for the people who start their career.
Sure.
So does the industry knowledge to some extent required for them to at least begin the journey?
I don't think that can be an expectation. I don't expect that. I want you to be excited about gaining knowledge for that industry. I don't want you to already know, because you probably wouldn't. From an external source, how much can you learn? So a lot of people come into Spinny, or in previous companies also that I've worked in. I've worked in companies which have been very, very technical. I've worked for a fintech company where we were designing products for hedge fund investors. Now that's a very niche industry. Now how do I expect a designer to know about that, especially early designers, right? So I don't have that expectation, but I at least want to see that curiosity, that you want to learn about this industry. And at least there should be some bit which says that okay, you're excited about it. The other part to this is also that I could actually differentiate between people who are in general very curious and very excited to know about something new or something that they don't know. I really like those people, and I think those also are the people who make great designers in the end. So yeah, that's I think that's the expectation I have from a hiring point of view.
Okay, so this brings me to the next question, which is about soft skills and very particularly about communication skills. How important are these specific to the design fraternity or to the design skill altogether?
Sure. So I've been taking a lot of interviews, and one of the skills that I look for, especially for designers, is communication. And I want to put it this way, that a lot of designers are really, really smart people, but they're not able to communicate that smartness externally. So I think design communication becomes very, very critical at that part. And when you're working in any company, I think how you communicate about your design becomes very, very important. The kind of vocabulary you use to justify your design decisions is also very, very important. So overall, communication is a major, major part of being a designer.
Okay, so let me ask you about the trends that are happening in the industry, primarily UX UI as an industry and UX UI as a skill.
So I think within the entire tech space, UX has become very, very relevant, important. In fact, if you look at the top companies that we are talking about every day, the likes of Zomato, the Creds, uh, all of them are design-driven companies. So of course, that has shown across the entire Indian startup ecosystem that design is very, very primary, and it's very, very important for companies to grow and differentiate them from their competitors or differentiate them in isolation in the market. So that has definitely grown a lot. And if I just talk about UX as a field, the growth that has happened in the past decade, I think we are almost at maturity, where 10 years back, if you'd asked me this question, I would not have a very straight answer saying that okay, we're still figuring out what the process is, what the correct method is, or what the right person to do that job is. Even that part was still blurry. Now I know exactly what I need as a skill. Now I exactly know what skills are required for me to excel in UX, what kind of thinking goes into it, what kind of processes to follow. So I think that maturity, we're getting there. We're not there yet, but that maturity is hitting. Then there is some predictability around the skills as well.
So, Ujjwal, you have been in the industry for a very long time. I believe more than a decade, right?
Yeah, more than a decade.
So, help me understand. I'm sure you would have guessed the question already coming. Is what is this AI thing kind of coming in every field?
Yeah.
How do you foresee AI kind of intervening, interrupting, disrupting the field and the industry?
So there are a lot of voices around AI, especially in design as well. My opinion, at least so far from my limited understanding or whatever, has been that it's not a disruptor, at least not yet. It's something that is a very, very efficient tool for a designer. For example, let's say there was no Figma, the tool that is currently being used in the design industry a lot. There was no Figma 10 years back, so our work was not very smart. But now that I have a tool like Figma, my work is much more efficient, much faster. So what that does is that makes gives me more time to think about things versus drilling down on execution. Similarly, AI is that form factor where I have a tool that I can use, but it's still a tool. It's still in a format of a tool. So I can leverage it and do 10x or 20x the amount of work that I would previously be doing manually. So that's where I see AI so far. Also, I feel that some of the new trends that I'm seeing in design is very AI driven. One is within Spinny, my company, also a lot of personalization exercises is what we're doing, and you would see this happening within the industry itself. That now that we are becoming smarter in understanding who the user is, so we can leverage AI to do a lot of personalization at a user level, right? So that is one trend that is going to come up a lot. The other part is voice interface has matured. So earlier, if you would talk to Siri even, the level of predictability in the answers was not that high. Plus, the level of recognition of your voice itself was not that high. The accent was another problem. But now that there is predictability that if I'm going to speak a sentence, it comprehends the sentence as is. There is no, there's not a lot of deviation. So the moment this system becomes mature as it has today, voice interfaces will start to come up, right? And another, not exactly artificial intelligence, but the other things that I see happening in design now is we are at the cusp of AR becoming mass market. We're right at the cusp. I think the recent announcement by Facebook for their
Yes.
smart glasses, that's almost there. That we are almost there where we can have a mass market product which you can actually buy, and it's at a reasonable price. So I think in the next 4 5 years we are going to see a lot of design happening for specifically for augmented reality. So that's one trend that I'm definitely going to see. And another design trend that I would just add in is that because of artificial intelligence, because of new tools getting developed every day and tools getting smarter, Figma in fact introduced their AI features. There are other tools, there's so many other tools, design tools, where you can leverage AI to create design. So the execution part is getting smarter day by day, and that's the part that scares designers, that if execution is something that I'm not taking care of, then what am I doing? So idea creation is going to be the major role and the major game changer. So you as a designer, or even not just as a designer, as a business, start thinking about novel ideas, fresh new ideas, because execution will always keep getting faster, 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 and faster. So ideas will now have a much stronger place. I think a decade before, ideas were something that were not talked about so much. Execution was talked about a lot. But now that execution has become easier, ideas will become stronger again. The last design trend I would like to talk about is a lot of companies are now gaining their own identity in design. So previously, again, 5 6 years back, we would be talking about how good design Apple UI is, or how good Google is doing their design. Those were standards in design. Those were basically safe designs. Those were designs that people were getting accustomed to or used to. So every product were trying to replicate those legacy products. But if you talk about it today, every new product is coming up with something crazy, something new. Every product is creating its new identity in design. And that's what the next trend is, that you don't need to follow the rule. You can break out of the rule and you can create something completely fresh. And if you do it well, then you're probably going to be talked about a lot more than your legacy products that already has been there for a really long time. So I think these are some of the design trends that I foresee coming, and I think this is where we should be heading from the entire design community. These are the things that we should be looking at.
That brings me to a very interesting question, which is about how this new generation, which is again the aspiring designers or people who are thinking that design could be one of the fields to grow, what do they need to prepare themselves with? Apart from just the design school, the design colleges they are getting into, or the boot camps they are attending, what is that extra piece that they should be ready with?
I think one thing we should always keep appreciating, and this should happen very early on, that you start solving problems. Problem solving is the key to design. It has always been and it will always be. You're still solving problems. I'm also trying to solve problems every day. Now, if I take it a step further, I would define it as problem solving systematically. So this is what you need to get good at, and as early as possible. So let's say you're in school, you have to manage your homework, you have to manage your hobbies, you have to manage time, you have to take out time for play or whatever. If you start to organize these things, maybe create a table for it, that's where design starts to come in a systematic way. So the system part is very, very important, and that's what you end up developing once you become a mature designer. In fact, when you level up in seniority as a designer, your system thinking becomes more and more polished. So that's where we are heading, where we're systematically trying to solve problems. And once you start systematically solve problems, then you try to aim for scale, that I'm trying to solve systematically at scale. And if those things are achieved, so those are the ultimate goals for a designer or for any company as such as well. So these are the core, I would say, philosophies that if we are able to inculcate in a child, or even somebody before college, then they would be looking at design from that point of view, that this is going to solve a problem for me, and I can do it for a couple of more things, and how can I use this template at some other place and make that system efficient. So these are the kind of things that we should start thinking about as early as possible, and I think that's how you start, and that's how you eventually end up being a designer as well.
So, should I believe that design thinking should be inculcated from the schooling itself?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think uh, design thinking should definitely be a part of curriculum. If it's definitely not there yet, and I don't know how that is going to be incorporated into the current system of education system that we have. But apart from that, we should also encourage novel ideas, out of the box ideas, because that's the other aspect of it, that you have to continuously keep thinking of something creative. So creativity along with design thinking, this is the perfect mix for a great designer.
Perfect. Now, let me ask you some very pressing questions about what most of the designers struggle with. And they're still kind of not able to find answers. And I'm talking about the designers who are either trying to enter the organization, the industry, or they're figuring out which industry they should get into. So, first come first.
I think storytelling is something that a lot of people struggle with. They're not able to connect the dots properly, and I've seen that in a lot of portfolios, that they try to write a plethora of a document which is like 30 pages long, which is a task for me to look at or read through. But there is no storytelling involved. It's just a lot of written and a lot of content available there. So I think if you can make whatever you present, it could be a portfolio work, it could just be a project presentation within a company, if you can make that entire piece of story consumable, crisp, then you have solved a very big issue. Because a lot of times what happens is, within a company you would have multiple level of stakeholders, right? And every stakeholder will have a very short time that they will assign to you to look at your work. Now, for that, in every level of stakeholder, what is the story that you want to tell them? Stakeholder who is at the same level as you will talk about your entire process. You'll talk about your struggles, you'll talk about what the final outcome is. But for a very senior stakeholder, you'd probably only talk about 5 things or 3 things. So you're very focused and crisp on what story you're telling, and when you are able to extract that out of whatever project that you've done, uh, that creates an impact, because then whatever you're saying, whatever point you're making, is important, is relevant, and that puts you in a very good position. And this same philosophy can be applied to portfolios, interviews, that when you're talking about yourself, when you're talking about your work, what is the story that you want to tell, what is the most important story that you want to tell? Start with that first. And this is I've seen people struggle with this, that they present a weak project first, thinking that okay, this covers some other aspects, and their actual important or the impactful projects are not even present in the interview process or in the conversation. So I think that figuring out part is something that people and early designers should definitely try figuring it out.
So, would you suggest starting with the presentation of a portfolio project which they are very confident about, or a portfolio which covers a large spectrum of his or her skills?
Sure. No, I think it should be one strong project first. One strong project, one strong story, and then maybe add another if you have another one. For an early designer, I don't expect them to work on 10 projects. I don't expect that. I expect them to have potential and skill, and that can be showed with one project itself. So I think I've selected a lot of people in my team also who have one strong portfolio project, and that is good enough for me to understand what that person does, what that person is, and how they think.
Lovely. Now, help me understand one very critical aspect of, I would call it soft skills, which I find that most of designers are lacking in some or the other way, and which is networking. How would you, one, tell me the importance of networking for design as a profession, and two, how these young designers should start with networking with peers, with like-minded professionals, to understand more about the profession?
Yeah, I think when people talk about networking, they only look at it from one angle, that if I start networking, I'll get a job. So I think we need to remove that first of all. I think networking should help both parties, right? A lot of designers and early designers who have reached out to me for a feedback on their project, I've been able to do that, and I've been able to have conversations with them. In fact, I've had two of them in my team also. They did not approach me for a job. They just asked me to, look at their work and just give feedback on their work. So that is authenticity in networking. That's not like you're not asking for something, just asking for feedback. And why am I interested as a stakeholder or as a senior designer? Why am I interested in speaking to a person like that? Because I'm looking at curiosity, and that interests me. Somebody is coming and asking me genuine questions. So I think that's where we should start. That try to make authentic connections, even if you're using LinkedIn. Try to make authentic connections. Tell them, you just want to learn from them, or you just want to understand their workflow. And when you get to a certain level in your career, then you can also start adding value to them. So let's say, I'll give another example. For a period of time, we had only one user researcher within our team, and that person did not have another peer, another user researcher within the organization to have conversations with, to have that learning experience with. So I asked her, and she's been doing it for a while, that she reaches out to people, she talks to a lot of user researchers working in other organizations, and they do a lot of knowledge sharing. So that kind of conversation, that kind of networking really, really helps. You can do that as a designer as well, or at any level. And I think the power of networking is that you are making yourself visible, and it's not like there is a job every day, but the day there will be a job, that person will probably think about you first. That's where it works. So don't go with that intention that, okay, this person is going to, if I message a hiring manager, he's definitely going to give me a job, because that's where the authenticity of networking loses.
And I think I kind of second the thought of networking. I've been doing, in fact, my entire bread and butter works on networking,
Sure.
where I have never approached people with a transaction in mind.
Right.
Because the moment you think about, I will connect with this person for this, the entire authenticity is lost.
Absolutely.
So, which is where even I believe and second the thought of networking without an intention, rather a focus on learning and expanding your vision. So, as an advice to these budding designers or people who are looking for transitioning into UX UI, what would be your advice to how to do that transition, how to handle it?
Absolutely. So I think yeah, one of the things, and the most important thing is, be prepared to work hard. I think a lot of people who have not been in design. In fact, someone in my family called me recently, and they told me, I want to get into design just because it's a high-paying industry, or it has a very good scope or whatever. But I could completely understand that person was not interested in the field, was just interested in the show of the entire industry. So I think one key thing is that be prepared to work hard. It is going to be difficult to enter, and it will be difficult to get your first internship. And it has been more difficult now, since a lot of people are trying to come into design, even if you are from a design college or from a non-design college. So if once you're ready to work hard, then you work hard and create an amazing portfolio, even if it's one project. A lot of people struggle to find that one project. That should that project be a live project? Should that be a project that if I've not had an internship, then how do I put a project in my portfolio? Then find problems in your society, find problems with people around you, and just try to solve one of those problems, and do it with all honesty. Spend 6 months on it. Do your research. Refer to existing products for visual design and everything. Try to make that one strong portfolio project, and then you start networking with other designers and start seeking feedback on it. Iterate, because that's how we work in the industry as well. Our first design is never the final design. Once you start iterating, seeking feedback, and you can seek feedback if you're in a design school. You can seek feedback with your peers in your class, or you can start seeking feedback with early professionals or senior persons. Try reaching out to people, seek feedback, and validate that this is a good project, and then you start approaching companies. But have that very, very well done exercise if you really want to get into design, and be ready to work hard. And I think you'll get it.
Lovely. So we're kind of coming to the closure of the podcast. Help me with a few tips and tricks, or maybe a few platforms which these designers can use to enhance their knowledge, expand their network, or anything that will help them fasten their journey, making it smoother and more relevant.
Sure. So I think I'll tell you a few tricks that I've also used. I think first and foremost, find a formal linear learning path, even if it's online. You can go to a YouTube channel and see if they've made enough number of episodes on how to start and how to end that entire design learning journey. If you're going to Udemy, you can probably take up a course with a small fees. If you're going on any other platform for learning, just see that that path is created and it's not breaking in between. So that's for hard skill, right? But after you've learned the tool, after you've learned and after you've gotten like an overview of the process, then you start trying to replicate some of the designs that are already there. So one of the exercises I ask designers to do is look at Zomato today, replicate it without uh, just replicate the design. If you're able to create that same design, then do it with other products, do with different styles of products. That's a very easy way to get yourself ready for visual design. Another, and as far as platforms are concerned, I think LinkedIn is very strong. Follow the right designers, read their blogs, and if they're making YouTube videos, then you can obviously watch their YouTube videos as well. So these are, and I think YouTube itself is a very, very good learning platform. If you are able to find some good content creators around design, you can follow them. I personally, I like reading, so I follow certain designers who write a lot about, senior leadership in design. So that's where I'm getting my, source of information. But it's like everything is out there right now. There's so much information on the internet. If you're just able to find the right people, you'll be able to learn a lot just from scrolling or browsing.
Lovely. And I believe you also run a YouTube channel where
Yeah.
you educate people, where you talk about mistakes, talk about improvements. So if our audience wants to follow you, where can they follow you?
Yeah, so I go by the name Ujjwal X Design on YouTube, and you can. I've just uploaded 9, 10 videos on my channel, and again, I'm trying to be as honest as I can about the industry, about my struggles and my learning. So you can go and watch my videos there. Uh, Apart from that, I think Instagram, I go by the name Ujjwal Live, so you can connect with me there as well. So these are some platforms where I'm there and I'm speaking with people and I'm answering questions every day.
Lovely. Any final advice to any designers, non-designers?
I think my final advice would be just like believe in yourself. I think that is where a lot of designers struggle, believing in themselves and fighting the imposter syndrome. I think that these are the two things that designers or any creative professional go through. Your work is real, your talent is real, and like don't ever think or don't ever underestimate yourself, and don't ever undervalue yourself as well. So just like try to gain as much confidence and know that you are one of the smarter people in the room in probably most cases.
Thank you for watching the video till the end. I hope it added value. Please like, share, and subscribe. And do let me know in the comments if you want me to explore any other career.